Hey milk bars and trips to Mars, welcome to another video. What you're about to watch is actually a section of a much larger conversation between myself and my good friend Justin Koo, aka That Christian Vlogger. We both read Francis Chan's latest book, Letters to the Church, and we had a long form, almost 3-hour discussion on it, half of which is being released on this channel, the other half is being released week by week on his channel. So make sure you go and subscribe to Justin's channel. It's That Christian Vlogger. It is linked below. You're about to watch one section of that conversation. If you want to see the full conversation, that was actually released only to our Patreon supporters. So if you would like to support me, you'd like to support Justin and our ministries on Patreon, you can do that through the link in the description as well. But as for right now, we hope that you enjoy this clip of Letters to the Church, a discussion between myself and Justin Koo, aka That Christian Vlogger. Chapter 8 of Letters to the Church is entitled Unleashed. And in this chapter, Chan is speaking about sending the church out, the people out to be in the wild again. He starts the chapter by, I believe this is the one where he talks about the movie Madagascar.
Yeah.
Right? And talks about how these are domesticated animals that are actually sent back out into the wild. And he uses that as sort of a parallel for the church, how we as the church in America especially, we've become this domesticated version of something that was originally intended to be out in the wild doing work. And I know we were just talking about, you had one sort of, literally just one takeaway that you wrote down from this chapter. So what was that for you?
So in the story there was, or in the chapter, there was a story of a Filipino ministry. Maybe it stood out to me because it said Filipino, not Filipino. And he was saying how back in the day, he used to send missionaries who were from the Philippines. He would send them to the United States to be trained before they would then go on to their next assignments or whatever the case is. And he soon realized that that was like a terrible idea. And the reason why was because once they made it to the United States and they experienced some of the comforts and the luxuries that we do experience in a first world, that they basically never came home because they're like, you know what, this is so nice, this is so comfortable, I'm staying here instead. And they lost sight of the mission, they lost sight of the vision. And the conclusion from this pastor was, I'm never sending my missionaries to be trained in the U.S. anymore. I'm keeping them here. He said specifically, I want to keep them in the wild, and I want to keep them on mission. And that resonated with me so much. It actually reminded me, this is going to sound really weird, but I was a really weird Christian back in the days. When I first gave my heart to the Lord, I was in Bible college, doing a lot of ministry, really internalizing the concept of being on the front lines and things like that. In my dorm room, there was bunk beds because I had a roommate with someone else, but I slept on the floor for 2 years. Next to my bed, I slept on the floor, and people were always like, what are you doing? And my internal reasoning behind this was, I want to remember that I am a missionary, that this world is not my home, that this dorm room even is not my home. I never want to be comfortable because I always be ready to be sent out by God. And I know that sounds really weird, radical, but in my mind, that was just like a ritual that I could do every day to remind me to stay on mission.
Yeah, I did the same thing in college, but only because I actually found the floor more comfortable. And to this day, I'll still sleep on the carpeted floor sometimes.
I try to convince Emily that we could just get one of those Japanese style beds without the risers and just have a mattress on the floor. Yeah, and she's like, nope, not doing that. So.
Yeah, I did the same. I mean, I've done the same thing, just for far less spiritual reasons, I guess. For far less spiritual reasons. Yep. So one thing sort of that is sort of, to me, the crux of this chapter is this idea that the church is meant to be there to train people up to go out and do work, to make more disciples. And this is actually something that Sweet Bear and I were studying in our Bibles literally this morning before we had this conversation about...
You guys are such an awesome, super Christian couple.
No, we are not.
Before I went on camera, or I was literally waking up 10 minutes before.
Well, we're in different time zones, so
true.
We'll give you grace. We'll give you grace there. So in the one time this month, Sweet Bear and I studied our Bibles together, we were talking about this exact thing and how oftentimes when I leave church, I'm talking about how what I learned for myself not necessarily how I feel like I was trained to go out and do work.
Yeah.
And so my question that I want to pose to you and to both of us is, at your church or in your experience with church, do you find yourself being mentored or taught how to be a better person? Or do you actually feel trained up to be a disciple and to go and make disciples? Because there's a difference, I think.
No, that's such a good question, and it's challenging for me to answer that question. We've talked about it in one of our previous videos on this series. My relationship to the church has kind of been distant in a certain respect. If I look at it from just the local church perspective, it's definitely much more of like, hey, come and like be affirmed in who you are, tips on life, things along those lines. Not so much training for mission work or service. If anything, in church, the extent that they cover it is that, hey, you have a mission, you have a calling, but not so much how to go about doing that. So no, I don't feel like I've been trained well to do that at church. At my Bible college, which was literally an evangelism school, yeah, I feel way better equipped for that. But I would say that for the vast majority, that's not something that's talked about a lot.
What were the things at that Bible college then that they were doing that equipped you or trained you that was different than what you've experienced within a church?
When we would open up the scriptures and we'd like study who God was and try to figure that whole thing out, it wasn't for the perspective of, oh, I just want to take this food for myself, but it was very much the mindset of, I'm simply a beggar telling another beggar where to find bread, kind of a thing. And so it was, and I think we made this an idol in the school, so it can go to another extreme, but it was like the only reason why I'm studying the Bible is so I could share this information with someone else. The only reason why I'm having an experience with God is so I can mirror that experience with someone else. And like I said, I think that goes too far, but that was kind of the framework in which everything took place.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, and we talked a little bit just before we started recording this about really the distinction for me, I think, is for a long time, I went to church. And if you think of the church as fitness, I was going to church merely for aesthetic reasons. Trying
to get jacked,
trying to get a six pack, so that at the end of a year of going to church, I looked really good spiritually. When actually, I think the biblical version of church and what church is and what the body of Christ is meant to do, it's actually more of a functional form of fitness.
Right.
So we may not look perfect six pack, wonderfully cut up, but if there's 600 pounds that need to be deadlifted, I know the proper form. I've worked hard to learn how to do that, and I'm ready to actually put that to use.
Yeah. There was a quote that stood out to me. I actually ended up sharing this on Facebook the other day. It got a ton of responses. We have to stop viewing church leaders as people who minister to us. God clearly explained the role. It's not to collar you, but to equip you. Think personal trainer, not massage therapist. I think I shared this in one of our previous videos, but that is so right on. Like church isn't supposed to only be about like making you feel good, but it's supposed to equip you for something bigger. Like the whole premise of Christianity is like we now have a mission. There's a purpose with our life. It's bigger than the American dream of just, go to school, get a good job, find a husband or wife, get the golden retriever, the 2 kids, and the swing, outside the white picket fence of your house, kind of a thing. It's there's a calling on your life, and I'm not sure that we always remember that in our church communities. We take it easy too often. One thing I really loved, he quoted a pastor in this chapter saying, the pastor would actually tell his congregation, I don't want you to be in this church for longer than 5 years. And I loved that because so many pastors, maybe without articulating it, their goal is to have their church just get bigger and bigger and bigger and people to basically stay there paying tithe and volunteering until they die. But this pastor's like, no, you stay here for a maximum 5 years and go somewhere else because I've given you all that I can. I've trained you as much as I can. Ideally, now you're going out there to go and serve.
Yeah, absolutely. So then sort of shifting this a little bit, so much of the modern American church today is built around letting people know how welcome they are here. And we want this to make this your home. Like we literally use the words home church. What's your home church?
Right.
Which
rather than like a
is
school or a mission center or
right.
something.
Yeah, and like every modern day church, you walk in and there's a big banner saying "Welcome home,"
Yeah.
and obviously that's founded in the idea of letting people know that they have a place, that they are welcome here. We want all people to be here, and we want you to create that family, like we were talking about in previous chapters. But then also there's this call to be sent out. So what to you then is the balance, if there even should be, between creating a home within your church and sending those people out? What's the balance, if there even should be one?
Yeah, I don't know. Like when I think about the New Testament, and this is how we started off this entire series in the first video. When we look at the New Testament's description of church, what do we see? Do we even see the concept of a home and a home church? I think in a certain degree, no. Like we just see people out there living missionally. And maybe in another sense, yes. I mean, what's his name? John did write to the 7 churches, so there definitely was like a home community. But the people that was kind of emphasized and focused on in the New Testament were largely missionary people.
Yeah, I mean, when you have like Titus and several of the pastoral epistles that were written by Paul, they're written to bishops of specific churches or specific areas. Really, it wasn't necessarily, I don't think, a home church as much as your city where you lived, and you were based there. But so you're right, so many of them, and so many of the apostles and so many of the authors of the New Testament, they were people who traveled and went around and, were doing their ministry out in the wild, out in the world.
Do you feel like it's possible to be a healthy, let alone a mature, but let's say, is it possible to be a healthy Christian without some type of mission on your life and some kind of intentional focus as far as how you're living and sharing?
I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure that it's possible to be a biblical Christian or a biblical disciple, because that's exactly what we see modeled, like we were talking about. We've been talking about the whole time in the New Testament. We see modeled people who are out, people who are on mission, doing things in the world. And I guess sort of my question back to you is like, what does that actually look like then? What does this sort of unleashed, out in the wild Christian look like today here in the U.S., not over in the Philippines or wherever else it might be? What does it look like for most of the people watching these videos?
That's such a good question. One of the things that I've been a huge proponent of, at least in my videos and in my personal conversations with people, is like, the first step is you just live a good Christian life and you're a light to those that are around you. And when people ask you questions, you're there to be a sojourner on this journey called life. But it does seem like that falls short of what God is telling us to do. Like, it's not like Jesus didn't say in the Great Commission, just be good people, and then when people ask you questions, be available. He said, no, go into the world and make disciples, teaching them, and then so what does that look like? I feel like it has to be some kind of intentional manifestation of you going out there trying to literally do what Jesus just told us to do.
Yeah, it's that thing that Chan talked about earlier, like look behind you.
Yeah.
And if there's nobody there, if there's nobody following you, if there's no one looking to you, if there's no one, for me, it's if there's no one who's being blessed and spiritually formed by you using your gifts in their life, then perhaps we need to look at that.
Yeah.
Perhaps there needs to be a change. And it's not necessarily that anyone who is not on mission is doing it wrong. I think it's more, and that they've fallen into sin and that God doesn't love them and they're not saved. I don't think it's that at all. I think it's more what most of the stuff we're talking about here, it's that they are only experiencing a fraction of the life that God actually created and has called us to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's probably also helpful for us to point out that we're not saying that the only kind of mission that God validates is like when you're like preaching with Bible in hand, or you're like, it's not that. Like your work could literally be the mission that God has called you to do. Like we talked about in previous videos, how one of the things that we see as a great need for growth in the church is some of the more basic. I don't want to use a basic. I don't like that word. Quieter things, preachy kind of things, like ministering to the widows and orphans is one thing that we had talked about. Yeah. And like, I think about my wife, Emily, she's an occupational therapist in the school district. She's working with developmentally disabled children, and she's literally ministering to kids who are outcasts of society. And I don't look at that as, and maybe I should be do a better job as a husband affirming my wife in this, but I don't view that as second rate to the ministry that I have on YouTube at all. I think that what she's doing is incredible.
Yeah, she's using her gifts and how God has gifted her. Because guess what? If you two switch places and she was only teaching and doing YouTube stuff, it wouldn't be as effective. And if you were there being an occupational therapist, it would be downright dangerous.
It would be horrible. So it comes down to knowing your talents and gifts and what God has equipped you with, and then really just being intentional about using those gifts to serve other people
in the world.
Yeah.
Hey friends, thank you so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this discussion, once again, head on over to Justin's channel, That Christian Vlogger. You'll find all of the odd chapter discussions on his channel. You'll find all the even chapter discussions right here. If you want to watch it all uninterrupted, you can just become a supporter of both of our Patreon pages. It is a great way for you to support the ministry that we are doing, help these ministries continue to grow, and you get to watch our whole almost 3-hour discussion of the book. You can watch that completely unedited, all put together. In the meantime, thank you all once again for watching. We'll see you next time on another video. I love you all. Keep being awesome.